Welcome outside Gillette Stadium, everybody. My name is Mike Petraglia, joined by old friend and colleague Chris Price, of course, the expert writer for the Patriots on WEEI.com. Chris, we just finished up listening to Nick Caserio, the Patriots Director of Player Personnel. We are just about a little over a week away from the Patriots drafting in the 2016 NFL Draft. And, of course, the big storyline because of Deflategate is that going into it, the Patriots do not have a first-round pick. What were your biggest takeaways from Nick Caserio and what he had to say about not having a first-round pick?
I don't think they're going to be shaken at all when it comes to their overall team-building approach this time around. I think the fact that they are not going to be on the board from 1 to 30, I don't think that I don't want to say they're not worried about that, but it's not going to change their overall approach. They're still going to do what they've done in years past. Look for that solid guy with that first pick. I know in the last few years, and Tom Curran actually followed a pretty good line of questioning with Nick. They've had some interesting picks in the second round. They've kind of taken some big swings, and that's resulted in some big hits with guys like Rob Gronkowski. It's also resulted in some misses. But at the same time, right now, I don't think they're going to change anything dramatically just because they don't have that first-round pick this year.
Now, there are a couple of positions of need, I think, going into this draft that certainly a lot of fans who have been following the Patriots in the offseason would agree that they might use the draft to address, namely the running back and possibly the offensive line. How would the Patriots, with maybe even a name like Ezekiel Elliott, if he is even available, if he even falls into the second round, there's some question as to whether or not he might, the star running back out of Ohio State, do they take a run at a guy like that? No pun intended.
I don't think that they would go after someone like Ezekiel Elliott. I think instead that they would wait to maybe the third, the fourth round. I still think that they are going to use one of those high-value picks, one of those top 100 picks, on a running back. I know there's been a lot of talk about, and the name escapes me now, running back out of Louisiana Tech, who I think would be a pretty good fit here in New England. I think there are a handful of areas of need for this team going into the draft. You want to build some depth on the offensive line. You want to build some depth on the defensive line as well with the loss of a guy like Dominique Easley. I think also you want to take a look at the cornerback position and ultimately running back. You want to be able to build some depth there as well. There are no huge positions of need. I want to stress that going in. There's nothing that they have to go and say, look, we absolutely have to take a tackle here. There are areas of need across the board. Again, it's more about depth at this point than specific help in 2016 for this team.
I still think that they could use another tackle, an offensive tackle. And to your point, maybe not a starting tackle if Nate Solder comes back healthy and Sebastian Vollmer, again, getting up there in his early to mid-30s, if he comes back healthy. If those two guys are set and you still believe in Marcus Cannon, which clearly they do, then that is not necessarily a position of need from a starting perspective. But I do think they need a guy there that can maybe come in, maybe even in the summer in the exhibition games, preseason games, and get some reps.
Well, I do think there is a need for a backup swing tackle on the roster. They have a couple of guys there now who might be decent fits sooner rather than later. A guy like Adrian Waddle signed to a 2-year deal this offseason. He was really banged up toward the end of the year last year, and I think at a perfect
shoulder problem.
Yeah, exactly. He might be that guy. He might be the kind of guy who could step in the short term. I'm not talking about being a long-term starter in the NFL, but if Vollmer goes down, if Solder goes down, he's the kind of guy you could plug in for 3, 4, 5 games to be able to fill in at both those spots. You can either do that or you can turn to the draft and, again, use one of those top 100 picks, maybe a guy like Spriggs at Indiana, Vidal Alexander at LSU. Those are just a couple of names that have been kind of tossed around when you're talking about the Patriots building some depth at that tackle spot.
All right, and we'll get to the free agency part of what the Patriots have done in the offseason in another video podcast. But I want to talk about how their changes along the defensive line, the front seven in particular, have really altered how they might go into this draft. Obviously, Dominique Easley, in a surprise to quite a few people, the Patriots gave up on him and cut him loose. Chris Jones, they cut loose last week. And obviously they have added guys like Chris Long in linebacker Shea McClellan. How might all of this impact how they approach the draft?
They're always going to be versatile. Look, it's a game-to-game, play-to-play defense, and I think that above everything else is going to be, the priority for this defense. They want to be able to show different looks, a three-man front, a four-man front. I have to believe that some of these moves that this team has made this offseason point to the fact that we're going to see more of a three-man front than a four-man front. When you think about the guys that they have lost, Easley, Chris Jones, Chandler Jones, Akeem Hicks, Silver Salinga, those guys, not, Chandler Jones aside, those guys are more 4-3 defensive tackle types. Now, the guys that they've added, specifically Terrence Knighton, suggest to me that, hey, you could look at more of a 3-4 set. Also, Shea McClellan, who I think has done his best work as an inside linebacker, exactly, as opposed to an outside linebacker. So you could start to see a shift more toward 3-4 this year. I'm not saying that that's going to be their base defense going forward, but I wouldn't be surprised to see more of it in 2016, even before the draft, than we saw in 2015. One other thing there, I think some of that does depend on whether or not you can get Chris Long to be able to drop into coverage. He's been a 4-3 defensive end throughout most of his career to this point. I think that you might ask him to do some different things in this defense if you do end up being a 3-4, because he would be it's a hybrid position, but he'd still be a 3-4 kind of outside linebacker rush end.
As we tape this, Chris, we still don't know what's going to happen with Tom Brady. We assume, maybe this is a very bad assumption on my part, that the vacated suspension will hold. Tom Brady will play the first 4 games. But if, surprise of surprises, the district court overturns it and it turns out that Tom Brady has to serve that 4-game suspension, Jimmy Garoppolo isn't going anywhere because he's a quarterback who knows the system, and Bill Belichick would never want to be caught short. So I assume a long-winded way of saying there's not going to be any April surprises with the quarterback position in a trade of Jimmy Garoppolo, right?
Yeah, I think that's safe to say. I think also, even all of that aside, I think they're very happy with where Garoppolo is at this point. It's my understanding that he has done a really good job picking things up. We don't know about him as a long-term starter in the NFL, right, and there's no way of knowing, what sort of production he would be able to put up if he was asked to be a long-term starter, 3, 4, 5 games, whatever. The one thing that I do know, specific to the quarterback position, and none of this should be taken as any sort of indictment on Garoppolo, the possibility of a trade, they always go out and get a quarterback almost every single year. Late rounds, undrafted guy for a handful of reasons, not the least of which you never know, because, Brady was one of those guys. He was a 6th-round pick who was brought in here a couple months after Drew Bledsoe signed a 9-figure contract. You have to go out and get a quarterback every year. You don't want to neglect the backup quarterback position. You want to be able to create a bit of a competition there as well. But it's just about not getting caught short, like right, Indianapolis did a couple of years ago. And I know that they kind of fell backwards into that and came out smelling like a rose because they found Andrew Luck. But I think that they're going to get a quarterback, whether it's a non-traditional guy like Keenan Reynolds or maybe a Dak Prescott type. The mid-rounds, late rounds, it would seem to be the kind of thing that the Patriots do every single year. I'd be surprised if they don't go out and get a quarterback this year as well.
Would Navy's Keenan Reynolds not be the classic Bill Belichick pick? Yeah, you would have to think if he's going to pick any quarterback to take a shot on, it'd be Keenan Reynolds, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think this time now, though, there's so much buzz around Reynolds because the Patriots have shown some interest in him. I think that if they do end up getting Keenan Reynolds, it would be one of those same situations like last year when we all talked about why are they drafting Joe Cardona in the 5th round. They would have to overdraft him a little bit, maybe a 4th-round pick, because I don't think he's going to last much past the 4th round given the amount of hype that's around him right now. Navy quarterback, kind of a non-traditional guy for those who don't know. He worked out for the Patriots, running back, wide receiver, kind of an offensive chess piece.
A slash type.
Exactly. If everything worked out perfectly for Keenan Reynolds, perfectly, I'm saying this is the end game for him, he becomes a Julian Edelman type at this level. And that's something to shoot for. I'm not saying that he's going to be there, but that's something to shoot for. But he is one of the more intriguing prospects in this draft.
I know you're writing about this on WEEI.com, but Nick Caserio's place in the Patriots infrastructure and their superstructure, he is in a great spot. I know you brought up to me the fact that there are other expatriates, so to speak, around the NFL who have made a lot of trades, who have made a lot of changes in their particular organizations, but with Nick Caserio, it's steady as she goes.
Yeah, I don't think that he is going to be, for example, John Robinson, Thomas Dimitroff, Bob Quinn. I don't think he strikes me as the kind of guy who is going to leave Foxborough, at least for the short term right now. He knows he's got a pretty good situation here. He's not the GM. There's not a lot of heat on him. It's not like he has to deal with a spotlight that some of those guys have to deal with, but he understands his place here. He understands his place here in the Patriots infrastructure. He knows he's got it pretty good. And so I don't think that he's going to be one of those guys. And that's not necessarily to say that, that's a character flaw, because eventually, you want to be able to control your own ship. You want to be able to control your own destiny, and to be able to go outside the system, like Quinn, like Robinson, Dimitrov, some of those other guys. I think it's a great experience, but I don't think that that's going to happen anytime soon for a guy like him.
All right, the Patriots have 11 draft picks. I believe that is the number between the Friday and Saturday, days 2 and 3 of the 2016 NFL Draft, April 29th and 30th. They do not, as we stand here right now, have a first-round pick in the 2016 draft, so they will probably be spending April 28th, trying to determine, is Keenan Reynolds worth a reach in rounds 2 through 5 on day number 2. But we'll have to wait and see how it all unfolds. Be sure to cover and follow Chris Price at CPriceNFL on Twitter, and yours truly at Trags. And don't forget Ryan Hannibal at Ryan Hannibal, all on Twitter, and follow all the coverage as the Patriots approach the 2016 NFL Draft on WEEI.com and the It Is What It Is blog. For Christopher Price, I'm Mike Petraglia outside Gillette Stadium, WEEI.com.